So we are happy to be here with our 5 panelists. So we have Stéphane Crozat, Léa Di Coccio, Patrick Blouet, Ilias Iakovidis, and François Briens, which you have already met yesterday. So we will first give the opportunity to each speaker to present a bit his background and his own vision on the role of ICT in the transition and how they feel this vision could be implemented in their own professional environments. So just as a small introduction, we had our participants make this very exercise. So thinking of the role of ICT in the transition and trying to reflect on their vision. So we try to divide the different ideas between 2 concepts. So the concept or ICT for green, where the focus is put on trying to exploit ICT to reduce the impact of other sector or to achieve sustainable goals, and the concept of green ICT, where we focus rather on reducing the footprint of the sector. So you will be able to find all your inputs on the Slack. So now I will leave the floor to the speakers to answer this first question. Stéphane Crozat, maybe you can start. Yeah, a few minutes. Try to keep it to a max of 5 if it's possible.
I try to respect the time more or less. So I'm Stéphane Crozat. I'm a professor at the Université de Technologie de Compiègne, school engineer in the north of France. I'm a member of the COSTECH lab, which is human science and philosophy lab, which works on relationships between human technology and society. I'm also a member of associations, Scenari Association, but here most of all Framasoft and Picassoft Association, which are association for the promotion of free software. I manage open courses on librecours.net. I publish my research papers on site web aswemay.fr, both librecours.net and aswemay.fr under free licenses. My actual works are around technology, ecology, and let's say conviviality. Maybe we'll talk a bit about this concept later. I opened recently a course named Low Technicization and Digital. Low technicization is in one word, the idea that digital cannot be low tech by definition, let's say, but we can imagine a more high tech or a less high tech, more low tech direction for digital technologies. And I'm also author of 2 science fiction novels, Trace in 2018 and Les Libres this year. Some extracts are to be read, if you like, tomorrow in the Ephemeral and Collaborative Museum. I had first question was to decline my vision of ICT role. Mainly it's a vision based on degrowth. We speak about this yesterday. To illustrate, the ADEME, French Agency for Environment, published 4 scenarios. The first one, they call it frugal generation. The idea in 2 words is to maintain more or less the state of the digital technology, for example, maintaining the number of data centers, not building new ones. So this is the scenario in which I build upon, let's say. And versus a 4th scenario, I don't speak about the 2 and the 3, which is called, I translate repairing bet, meaning more or less it's a technological solutionism scenario. Basically, the idea is to keep on growing and hoping that we'll find a solution and optimization solution before it's too late. How do we degrowth in the field of ICT? First of all, we can reduce some uses. For instance, the software innovations leads mainly to hardware obsolescence and renewal today, and it's one of the main problems of we have to face. They are mainly useless bureaucratic application. I think wherever you work, you keep on using computers for things that have no use. And we have also a question about, for instance, as our example, network speeding increase. We are building 5G, G5, G6, etc. Finally, in order to support 4K video on 5-inch screens, we can ask question about that. There are probably some use to that are quite easily to abandon. We could speak about high frequency trading. We could speak about advertisement. We could speak about NFTs, for instance. And of course, we have some use to preserve. First of all, because transition, what we're talking about today, implies digital modeling. That means that if today we can objectively speak about climate warmth, it's because forgotten the English. IPCC, sorry, studies relies on digital technology and modeling. So I used to say we have no ecological crisis without digital technology to prove it. Of course, other uses to preserve communal uses, less transportation, better connection between communities, etc. Societal important uses in medical field, etc., etc. Last point on this is probably well, I'm too slow, so I'll go on the second part more quickly. Second question was how to do this. First, theoretically, I think that the main orientation, well, the orientation I propose is to change the story we tell ourselves about digital. This story is today mainly written by the GAFAMs, the American giants or the digital giants in general, not only in America, but mainly in America for our own uses in Europe. And this story is more or less having more tools, more powerful tools, etc., etc. And I think we can build other stories of digital desirable futures, which promote what I call conviviality. I take this concept from Ivan Illich. In towards means working on how we can better live together with the technology, but it's not always synonyms to having more or more powerful systems. For instance, we know that very simpler and less powerful computers allowed in the past, in the quite recent past, to build things that is the internet, the web, work on the moon, or build a system like Linux, or these did not need the power we have today. I'm trying to cut a little. Well, our second part, practically, as a university professor, I think we cannot change directly the law. We cannot decide what the company does. That's a bit the question we had today. But we have enough freedom today to manage our course the way we want, so we can tell these other stories to our students. They can agree with them or not, but we have this power to build another future or another or other desires. This is possible in particular in the domain of IT, just because the demand for engineers, the demand for computer scientists is very strong. So we have this
Stéphane, we're gonna have to.
Yeah. Okay. I'm concluding. No, I stop. I'll try to keep the rest for. No, I knew 5 minutes was a bit short. Thank you very much, and sorry for the time.
No problem. Leah, maybe.
Okay. So I will be short. Okay, so I'm Leah Di Coccio. I'm a director of research at CEA Leti, here at Grenoble. I've done a lot of developments of high-tech technologies in the field of semiconductors. And let's say 4 years ago, I decided to switch to eco-innovation because I don't know, I had an illumination. No. So for me, it was important to understand what was going on and how I can change the research we are conducting in our research office. So we launched, and I am the head of the program, we launched the Eco-Innovation Program inside our RTO, Research Technology Office. And based on the fact that the LCR, so life cycle assessment of ICT, shows that it's about 50% of the impact came from the manufacturing, I say almost, and 50 from the use for the global image, for the mondial image, because of the non-decarbonized energy. But in France, it's mainly coming from the manufacturing. So we are doing a lot of LCA on our technologies to understand where are the out points that where we can decrease this impact. And also we are thinking again and again how we can switch the way we are doing our research. So, one of the questions is, do we have to pursue the performance increase of the semiconductors? Because we are doing semiconductors, we are not doing lots of system or and so on. So semiconductors are really tiny parts inside the systems. We are designing them that they can have a lifetime of 10 years and more. So we have not the obsolescence in semiconductor is not a point, but we are always designing and decreasing the nodes technology and increasing the performance. This means that we are always we have the needs to build more and more bigger factories using lots of water and lots of energy. So how we can switch that, doing more with the technology we have already in our hands. And the other questions, the other question, and it's an important one, as a researcher or a technological engineer, are we the one to choose which technology we have to develop or not? So I think this will be a question we will discuss. And I try also to understand what will be the switch to in our technology to go in that way that we are decreasing a lot our impact and doing this technology that we need in our everyday life in a better way with less impact.
Thank you, Leah.
It's okay. It's open.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Patrick Blouet from ST Microelectronics. I'm located in Grenoble. So I've been in ST for a long time, that close to 30 years. And before I worked in a small company, in a startup, which became an SME for 10 years. And then before in another big companies in telecommunication. So my background is mainly in signal processing, image processing, computer system. And then with ST, I joined ST to work on signal processors. And I've been also deeply involved in the mobile technology because at point in time in ST, I was the director of the service of the division that in charge of the architecture of the mobile product, so that I know very well this domain. So I spend a lot of time in the technology. I'm a poor product of the technology, I would say, because I started my career that the PC didn't exist at that time. So I saw everything happening that in this domain. I contributed to that also in some way. But I had also another interest for more than close to 25 years. After I read the book of Dennis Meadows, that The Limit to Growth, I clearly understood that there will be a problem. And then I started to look at the problem of environment, energy, climate, and I'm following that for more than 20 years now. So that I think a good understanding of the problem. In parallel of that, I am also chairman of a working group at European level, whose mission is really to look at what needs to be done in order to have a greener electronic in Europe, so to try to reduce the footprint of the electronic in Europe. I've been deeply involved in ICT OC because I have also been part of the steering group for the ETP for HPC, so trying to define what has to be done in Europe for high performance computing. And then I would say I'm there because more that with, I would say, my environmental hat than really my technical hat in terms of technology. Because today in ST, I'm working in the European and public affairs teams, where I'm taking care of projects around the environment. So what's the role of ICT? That's very, very wide question. And I think what's important to understand is from which ICT we speak. Because for me, there is a lot of ICT, meaning that there is things which are absolutely mandatory, that when you have ICT, that which are processing MRI image, that to try to detect a cancer or tumor, that it's really the thing we need. When you look sometimes the gadget that we are using connected to the, let's say, the network, the telecommunication network, it's really a question that do we need that? So somewhere I think we're at the point where we put under ICT a lot of things. We don't have the same level of, let's say, relevance regarding what we need, the same level of impact regarding the usage we are doing of that, the same level of impact in terms of environment. But basically, that's a fact that now ICT has a very huge impact on the environment, while at the same time, the electronic industry and the semiconductor industry did an extraordinary work that to try to reduce the power consumption. Because when you look at, let's say, at the numbers, I joined ST at the point where we were doing a 0.5 micron, meaning 500 nanometer technology. Then we are doing now 5 nanometer technology in the semiconductor industry. In the 30 years period that we more or less decrease by a factor of 800 to 1000 the elementary consumption of a basic transistor. So this means that the semiconductor industry did an outstanding job there. But at the same time, we multiply by 10 the CO2 emission of the ICT globally. So this means that even with the big progress we made on the technology, it doesn't been enough to compensate that the impact always more and more important that generated by the ICT. It's clear that with this trend, we cannot continue like that. We have to change things. And it's really time to consider that for what we use the ICT. Somewhere, I think, as an engineer, that I see very often, we are now at a period where we do things because technology allows us to make it. And sometimes we forget the question that why do we do it? What is the problem we want to solve? Today, I think ICT is needed. Because already explained by Stéphane, for instance, it allows a lot of modeling, a lot of, let's say, reduction of use of some resources that having a system which are very optimized. So ICT is needed. Do we need ICT for all the, let's say, the application which are today supported by ICT? This is another question that for sure we have to reduce because we will not continue on the trend we are. Everybody speak, we see that this year that the problem with the heat waves, the fires, the dryness everywhere, so that we can't continue like that. So we are at a point where it's very important to start to think why we do the things and why we do the things, and then how we do the things. As Leah explained, and it's I can tell you there is some companies which are really starting to think about that. Do we need the latest technology for everything? What we can do with the technologies which are already existing? What we can do in order to have better repairability of the system in order to try to reduce the impact we could have in buying new boards instead of continuing to use the one we are using. What we can do in terms of having systems which are much more reliable to avoid obsolescence, that for sure software obsolescence is one problem. Sometimes we are changing the hardware just because the current hardware is not able to support the new software. So this means that there is a huge work to do in order to make in adequation the hardware as a software, the need we have in terms of ICT, the level of performance we need, what we can do with what is already existing, because I'm pretty sure that we can do a lot with what is already existing. And the other question is that with ICT, we are generating a deluge of data. Not all the data have the same importance, and not all the data need to be stored for the infinity. There is some of them which are very volatile that maybe we could decide that to erase them, to suppress them maybe after 1 week, I don't know. Some others that we really need to keep them. Today, everything is at the same level. And there is no distinction about, let's say, the interest of the data. If it's something we need to keep, is it something that which is just volatile and a few hours from now that there's no more, we have no interest. So I think we need to have a lot of reflection on the ICT, on how we use it, why we do it, and how we do the things. That for me, it's really the point where we are today, considering that we go with the business as usual, meaning that yes, we have a big data center, we need more performance, so we build a data center twice bigger than the one we had before with a new technology. It's an easy thing to do. One thing I had to leave in the, yes. Okay, so I keep the rest for the next question.
Thank you. But the question of the need is important, and I think we will come back on it.
Yeah.
So maybe Ilias?
Yes, bonjour. Thank you for the invite. I work in the European Commission. I worked more than 20 years on digitizing healthcare, and now more than 5 years on digitizing the environment and climate. I would like to just basically say that in the Commission, so I don't know how familiar you are with what we do, we have basically the digital part of the house and we have the environmental part of the house. And they were for decades not speaking. I mean, they didn't see the need that they have something in common. So I was one of the first ones to try to make the bridge. And that bridge became a very important bridge for the new Commission. So Ursula von der Leyen, our new president, basically said we have a twin transition. Digital and green are the two pillars of the new Commission. Those are the two most important transitions that we're going through. That was before the war, of course. And now we need to make sure that they synergize. So looking and talking to many, many companies, NGOs, governments, I see that there is a polarization in the society. If you talk to the ICT industries and ICT, let's say, the world of ICT stakeholders, they see ICT as a solution for climate change. When I talk to the environmental agencies, to the kind of the environmentalists, they see ICT as the pollution for the environment. And that schism is there. And it's becoming slowly kind of a religious war because we have no evidence. There is no data, what it really does. So we have ITU standards. We are coming up with some standards on measuring the footprint of phones. And so coming back to Lea, yes, there is a very specific footprint coming from manufacturing and from the usage. As you go from the consumer device, like mobile phone, 85% of the footprint is the manufacturing. And as you move towards laptop and server, it becomes 50-50. And if you move to the telecommunication equipment, the usage, the energy, the footprint of the energy use is becoming bigger than the manufacturing. But overall, Lea is correct that it should be thought about as 50-50. For consumers, we should actually give the idea that they should not change the phone so often because the most of the footprint in whatever they see around is in the manufacturing. So that is what I'm trying to work evidence if it's pollution or solution. So I have established a so-called European Green Digital Coalition. It's 35 biggest ICT companies to agree with us to say we will come up with a measure and metrics and standard how to measure enablement, because we do have standards how to measure LCA. So LCA, there are many standards, still there's a problem with consistency, that's fine, but we have no measure what kind of good ICT does. So we are developing metrics on how to measure enablement. And that will not come as a surprise. ICT can do a lot of good, many times more than its own footprint, but only if and only if it is properly designed, used, and governed. And this is the biggest mystery. How do we use ICT to be in the positive space? I can give you later on some examples, so I will not expose now, but ICT is a double sword. You can do excellent things and you can do really bad things if you kind of leave it for free. And if you just leave ICT without any governance, the tendency is that it goes and creates inequalities, environmental pollution, So it's not neutral. And we need to make sure that we govern. So I agree with Stéphane, what he said, and also what Patrick is saying. We need to start with the needs. What are the needs of our future society? And make sure that ICT comes in to serve those needs. Because now it's kind of, we run after the ICT. Even I sit in the department that is issuing the AI Act, if you heard what that means, the CHIPS Act, Digital Services Act, Digital Market Act, and Data Act. These are my colleagues, and you will see how much there is still to do on environment, but we are running after the fast running machine of digitalization to try to regulate it after it's too late almost. So we need to kind of, coming back to Stéphane, we need to actually see what are the needs of the society. And now with the war, it becomes much more clear about the food, about the energy, about the shelter, about the basic needs of people. Because there is one thing that people didn't mention. Sustainability is three-dimensional world. It's economy, it's environment, and it's society. And it's the social issues that will make it or break it. Whatever we design here as green digital are in the mercy of the social dimension. If the social dimension is not right, everything will go down the window. Right? So poor people will never care about any environmental issues if we don't get it right. So that's just the intro, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Ilias. And now for the last panelist, François.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm François Briens. I have an engineering background. I was specialized in optimization of energy systems first, so I tend to have an energy approach to many issues. I'm working today as an energy analyst in an international organization, and I also did a PhD in macroeconomics and sociology and on degrowth, and I was doing prospective modeling of degrowth scenarios for France. So that's for my background. I will try to just give a few elements about the two different ways of approaching the issue that we're discussing now, green ICT and ICT for green, and my positioning on that. With respect to green ICT, my initial reaction was like, I'm not aware of any green ICT except maybe just natural communication, talking directly to someone who's in front of you. All technologies have an impact, and some less than other, but in any case, it makes no sense to call them green. And speaking of green ICT is strongly misleading in my opinion, first because there is no proper definition of green. What do we call green? On which criteria is it based? And with respect to which threshold or target, and who defined it? Are we talking about energy use, mineral use? Do we account for the entire technological system on which it depends, and on which extend actually to the totality of the economy in the end? So technology never exists by itself. It exists in an entire technological environment. That's what we need to take into account. It depends on an entire socio-technological environment. You cannot have cell phones without having the communication network, the satellite, the factory that produces the satellite, and all the rest, and all the factory which produce the tools for the factory which produce the tool, and so on. And that's, I mean, economies work as a very complex set of intertwined flows. So a technology is never to be considered just on its own, but as part of a bigger system. Another point also why green ICT, for me, in my opinion, is very misleading, is that the rhetoric leads to minimize impact perception and increase the risk of rebound effect via more licensing. I discussed this yesterday in my intervention. For instance, people could say, why be sober with the technology if it's green? And also speaking of green ICT, tend to put the focus on environmental impacts, but it leaves aside all other type of impact, which in my opinion, I am personally much more worried about it. like disruption of social relations, inequalities, social isolation, impact on cognitive capabilities, creation of dependencies and heteronomy of people and communities, power concentration. Like when you control information and communication channels, you have a massive power. Cybernetics and acute risk for democracy, which goes with it. So overall, no, green IT for me is a rhetoric scam. It's really greenwashing. And there is a collective book which was published this year about greenwashing in which I participated, which discuss green ICT, sorry, also. So green ICT, for me, it should be avoided. Now the question, ICT for green, I think this is a much more complex question. First, what exactly do we include? I mean, my point of view joins a lot of what has been said before also by others. First, what do we exactly include in ICT? What technology, what practices around these technologies, and what applications? It's pretty much the same issue as in digitalization, which I can observe in my job every day. Digitalization is used everywhere in the energy sector to depict completely different technologies and applications on which only a few specific ones are relevant. For instance, some specific sensors and control to optimize the use of energy and minimize the use of energy actually. But it gives an aura of respectability to all other application digital technology, which are often an ecological nonsense. So when we speak of ICT for green, we need to be much more specific about which technology and which specific use we're discussing. One possible application field I mentioned yesterday was that it would be interesting maybe to have application for democratic processes, because I think that democracy, it's really the common denominator of all issues. Once you have democracy, you can address all possible other social issues. And how can ICT help with direct and continuous democratic processes? How can it foster public debate and make it more effective? And without ICT becoming ubiquitous or mandatory, and while still having it as convivial as possible. So that's one field, but that's not all. The thing that we have to be very cautious about ICT in general. There is no evidence that ICT as a whole had a positive impact on the environment, and it's quite the opposite that seems true. It seems to act as a non-improvement tool or enabler for all destructive processes which the economic system incentivizes. And you can find one recent example in a PhD thesis from Van, which was published at the end of last year, I think, which is called Precision to the Aid of Pollution, How Digital Technologies Offer to Green Farm Productivism. So it just shows that far from ecologizing practices, the development of digital technology just fosters the development of productivism instead. And everything else about marketing, advertisement, mass media formatting, and so on it's something which has a very negative impact. So ICT for green, well, I will just come back to the same thing that has been said before again. I think that we need to further define collectively which sort of green society we want and what is the specific social needs we are trying to meet. And also, are there other more synergetic ways to meet them, which do not require ICT sometimes. So we need to involve actively citizens in the process of choosing which ICT we want to develop and implement and for what specific purpose. A typical counter example is the 5G, for instance, which was completely pushed by the private sector without any specific social demand. And that would have been avoided if citizens were involved in the process before. And also, so the question is also how to do with the least possible ICT, because the majority of humanity has lived without most of the ICT that we know and use today until the end of 20th century. And the end of 20th century is just yesterday and even earlier today at the scale of humanity. So, and studies show that the satisfaction of life and social well-being was not lower back then when we did not have all this ICT technology. So we need to open our mind and consider that ICT is never mandatory, it's never needed, it's a political choice. So I disagree quite strongly with the idea that some ICT are definitely needed. This is a personal opinion, it's not a consensus, it's an idea that fits in the development and progressive paradigm, and we need to consider it as such and keep in mind also a long-term perspective. Maybe we could...
François?
Wait, yes.
Do you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
I think
We will
we will switch to the debate part, because we already spent more than 30 minutes on individual presentation. But I think a common point between all of your opinion was the question of the need that we have to redefine together. Leah mentioned the question of as researchers, should we be the one who define the research direction? So I think that makes me ask a first question, which could be maybe for Stéphane. In terms of who defines the need, there was a lot of something that was coming back often in discussion with the participant is how can we actually include citizens in this decision? And could ICT help in some way in this direction? So in terms of participative democracy, I don't know if you have insights on that question.
Well, probably everybody will have some bricks to bring, but mainly we've seen this last year that it's possible to create wide networks of people discussing about things. The things we debate on Twitter at the moment shows that we can debate about things. So now the question is, how can we debate about useful or interesting things? There are interesting things too, but so the technical possibility of wide groups of people to speak together and to create, as I said, stories, fictions, desires, is today possible with the technology. So technology brings this possibility. Actually, we do not use it in the sense that it's not kind of political organization of the society to try and express, as it has been said by François, a kind of democratic common vision that we could elaborate together. And when I say common, I don't say unique, because of course there will be main different vision of this future. But if first of all we begin by expressing this vision, then we can debate, then we can organize, then we can try to select, etc., etc. But at the moment, these fictions are mainly elaborated, in my opinion, by advertisement, by big companies, which engineers and managers in big company, which claim to have the vision for the future for us. And well, just to conclude, yes, I think we could build at the state of government of course of Europe, for instance, kind of place to express this needs we say we have. I was shorter.
Yes. Thank you. You want to react?
Well, I think that maybe the young people, just like you, should engage yourself in politics more than you are doing nowadays. Because I think the trends are done by the politicians, and the industry weight a lot in the decisions made by politicians. So if we want that the society drives more what we are doing, I think that we have to engage, and this is my opinion, okay? We have to be more engaged than we are doing now in politics. And think tanks is a good thing to discuss, to have this democratic debate, and just like chief projects and so on. So we need to increase all these initiatives, I really think. But discussing about that, the democracy is also a problem. I'm sorry to say that. Don't cut the sentence, please. It's just because you will have gamers that will ask for this 5G, and you will have people that will ask for something else. So when will we decide that where is the majority, and do we have to skip the minorities? This is really, really difficult question of democracy. So it's not really so easy to say that we need to have these debates with the society itself.
Thank you, Leah. And maybe Ilias, you can react on it and on the fact that, do you think that we can use ICT to get more transparency and to motivate citizens to participate in the public policies?
Yes, definitely. Yes, let me link it to the previous questions. Yeah, there's a question of democratic deficits that François already mentioned, but I would ask, what needs are we talking about? Because there are three separate strands that have not been put together. And that's why you as a student, maybe for the first time in the history, we need to look at things more holistically, because there are economic needs. Economic needs are the drivers of politics. Economic needs will mean what kind of industry we'll have, the job. So then the people say, I want my job. So that means let's do this factory. Economic needs are dominating. Then there are the environmental needs that are coming up. They are the new kid on the block. So the Greens were kind of minority. Now it's becoming an issue because it becomes a war situation with the climate situation like it is. So the environmental needs are slowly coming up as important ones. And social needs are always there, kind of fighting their way to politics with organized, labor unions, social NGOs. So, and each of these groups talks another planet language. So they will say, I have this need as a social, I have this need as environmental, I have this economic, and nobody can integrate it into kind of a three-dimensional world and play with optimization theory in these 3 dimensions. Those are monologues of deaf people when they talk about needs. It's collective monologues. They don't put it together. And who wins at the end of the day? The economic needs. So can we as academicians bring a framework where there is measurement, there is some kind of a logical comparison? What is the ultimate vector of this 3-dimensional world that we want to go, which could mean that in economics terms, it will stagnate a bit. So the degrowth, it's kind of, it's there, but you have to look at it and put it together with, it's not only, I don't want economic growth. So ICT comes in because it can bring data. One thing, the most important thing I didn't say is that I work on circular economy. How can ICT work to help realize the concept of circular economy? We need data. We need data about every material, where it goes, kind of a material passport, product passport. I have worked and I've introduced that in the new regulation that was adopted in March called Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulation. So there is a concept of digital product passport. That means we need to kind of track and trace where our assets, the natural assets are, and how do we make sure that we don't lose them from a system, they don't pile up in some kind of a wasteland, and that we can repair, refurbish, remanufacture, and that we keep that value. So for that, ICT is needed. And that ICT and that data then becomes a transparent evidence for a public discussion. What do we really need to do in degrowth that meets social needs and that meets environmental needs? Sorry for this kind of a circular way to come back to your question, but that's how I see ICT can really help.
That because we spoke about democracy, and when we have debate on that, very often that when we speak about democracy, that we put in first place the capacity to debate, to express his ideas, and so on. We always forgot that we have at the end to accept the decision made by the group. And today, the big issue we have with democracy is that the people express their ideas and so on, but they have big difficulties to accept their ideas, especially for the environmental aspect, because somewhere it has an impact on our life, and some of the impact, we don't like them. So that we consider, and then it's not a good decision. We have to understand that democracy means also accepting the decision made. This is the first point. The second point, that it's no more a point that food for thinking. When we look at today all the modern democracies, there is not a single mandate for the politicians which are elected, which goes beyond the life period that we have to apply for, let's say, trying to solve the environmental issues we have globally, that it's something that which have to last for maybe the 10, 50, 30, 100 years coming ahead of us. All the mandate are less than 5 years globally. So this means in the modern democracies, there is a big issue, which is that the durability of the decision we are making. And we see very often that we make a decision, the next president or the next first minister, when they are the new one, they adapt or they cancel the decision or they modify it and so on. It's really a question I have, and it's not what I'm pushing. And that's what, as Leah said, that don't cut just this part, but somewhere, let's say the political, the dictature, I may be well prepared that to have long-term support. I'm not at all is what is going on in China, but it's clear that they are able to have plans for 10, 20, 30 years. The things which are completely missing today in our democracies. And all the issues related to environment will need plans that for a long period of time, and not things which have to change its mandate because, okay, it's now the party which has been elected, and in order to be elected, you promise things that to make your electors happy, but at the end, it's maybe counterproductive for the environment. So maybe we have to think in the democracy, maybe to change our constitution in order that to put the environmental issues or the environmental action we have to take broaden and cast in the constitution of our countries. Because for me, if not, we'll have a big issue with democracies that to have really action on the very long term.
Maybe François, online, you want to speak?
Thanks. Yeah, I would like to just react on what has just been said. There was something about the fact that people would have difficulties accepting collective decisions sometimes. My understanding of this is just that what they don't really accept is not the decision in the end, it's just that the process which led to this decision does not seem legitimate to the people who do not accept it. And this is a problem of lack of democracy, actually. It's same for the durability of decision, actually. It's not, the problem is not that the decision which is taken may not last for a long time. It's very good to have a decision which can be put into question a few years later and maybe adapted to a new context. So we need to have a reversible decision sometimes, except especially when we're in a context of high uncertainty. So that's not an issue. What I think is an issue that what we call democracy right now is representative democracy, and that's not what I would call democracy. What would be more effective is more direct democracy, and that's what we need. And if you read Castoriadis, it's, I mean, it was 40 years back in time that we were already understanding that representative democracy is not direct democracy and has a lot of flaws. It is better than a lot of different political systems for sure, but there's a lot more to do in democracy. So with more direct democratic processes where citizens which are not professional, like do not have a professional career in politics, for instance, they could maybe take better decisions based on less vested interest and so on. And there are plenty of reasons to include lay citizens and not professional of politics in the process. So just to conclude, just that the problem for me is that we are not talking about democracy. We are talking about representative democracy here. And direct democracy would be maybe more promising.
Just to, it works? Okay. Just to debate a bit with Ilias, maybe. I partially disagree with what you said, because you begin by explaining that the situation is complex. There are many parameters, and we cannot modeling. Let's say we cannot model these parameters. And then in the second hand, you talk about data and the possibility of, in fact, the hope of having a solution emerging from kind of rationalization. Oh, sorry, of the situation. You understood me. And I think there's a problem there, because the main model, the domination of economics, as you said, is not a domination of rationality and of data. It has not been proved that the capitalism is the best system. It's just the system which tells let's say, the better story at the moment. I use this term on purpose, and I used to put this this in that way. The story we are living here's the Thatcher story. There is no alternative. That means we have to live in this system. So let's get together so that it's not, well, so that economy maintains itself, because everything else is worse. And well, kind of joking with my students when I present this, I say we could have another system. So instead of China, it could be Tada, and Tada, which means there are diverse alternatives. And if we are able to build some other possibilities, and as Patrick shows, for instance, there are alternatives to representative democracy, which are not totalitarianism. There are other possibilities of organizing ourselves, and it's not because actual capitalism or actual democracy is to criticize that we are necessarily going to do totalitarianism in one end or poverty in the other end, for instance. So data, of course, to bring some objectivity, but I won't rely only on data. I think that a part of the fiction and the story we are told by the politician, economics, etc., are also very important.
Maybe to come back on that, so there seems to be this feeling that the roadmaps and the research roadmap elaborated, for example, at the European level are dominated by economical needs. So the question would be, how could we steer these roadmaps in the right direction? There was the suggestion of democracy, participative democracy. So for Ilias, maybe how feasible do you think infusing this participative democracy into the elaboration of roadmaps could be? And another suggestion that we discussed together with the participants was the question of the formation of the team at the European Commission. Maybe a smoother interaction with research in this way could lead to like deciders who are better formed to these stakes. So what is your input on these 2 points?
Yes, actually, I had last 6 months a master student, and he did a thesis on how are the legislations that we are putting up. So the Commission decisions on the battery regulation, on the eco-design for sustainable product, the circular economy action plan, and some other things. So he analyzed it on kind of a simple axis of holistic and segmented, very sectoral or more holistic, and then techno-optimism versus techno-pessimism. And guess what? Most of the narratives and the policies that happen in the Commission, which is already a consultative process, tend to be kind of techno-optimistic and often very segmented. I know only batteries, don't bother me about the bigger picture of this, okay? Which is the rare earth materials, the geostrategics of that, the EV and the tomorrow's mobility. Now let's focus on what I know as a department. And that's kind of systemic problem. As soon as you have ministries, you have general directorates, you have specialists in something, they will focus on that something. And they are not specialized, they are scared, they are unaware of the bigger picture. So there is a little bit of systemic problem, and that's true at every level, national, regional, European, global. But there is, what I want to say, there is this techno-optimism that Deus ex machina, something will happen, innovation will happen and will save us. And that is kind of permeated. So that's one thing. And second, that we have to look at 5 years ahead, although I would disagree with what was said before. We do have long-term plans. So we have 2050 targets, we have 2030 targets, we have Fit for 55. So we are working 3 political mandates ahead. But I agree with François, we should have the freedom of the next commission saying, oh, you missed it. You have to adopt and make it stronger or weaker in some cases. So there is this thinking in environmental sense on long term. It's already happening. So it's not, but I agree at the same time that politicians are a very special breed. I don't know, don't quote me on this one, but they have a reptile brain. That means what is moving slowly, which is environmental disasters in the past, aging process, aging society. Those slow movements are not visible. They are not something, they need war situation that is fast moving, and within 3 years, they can show a progress on something. And that is really a problematic. That's why you, the experts, the academic community, the NGOs have to create war situations on this topic so people can actually engage on political sense. What is glacial change is not noticeable by politicians. So that is something what we do. And coming back, yes, there is already a lot of consultation, but we need to bring the right dimensions of environmental expertise into the digital world. There is a complete missing of environmental thinking when digital laws are prepared. And vice versa, there is complete missing of digital experts in environmental laws. And systemically, we should push for that.
Maybe to come back on something you said, so you said that there was not enough of this systemic vision with many people like focusing on component issues such as batteries. Maybe that's something that can be tackled as well in research or in industries such as, I don't know if...
Yes, I mean, research can model the impacts of this, of the material world and the future society world of that battery, not only to focus to solve a very specific type of battery, and have regulation on that that is agnostic to social, environmental, and other things. Yeah.
It's related to the way research and industry is built nowadays, maybe not in an enough systemic manner. I don't know if
it's ex ante design of regulations, ex ante design that not all 3 dimensions. I come back to this kind of simplification. Environmental, social, economic dimensions are not balanced and well represented in designing regulation, designing initiatives, designing budgets and funding and innovation. So in research, it's kind of better, but it still does not link to policy immediately. Because there are like 2 types of people. I've been there, I've managed research, and we have one type of thinking, and then there are people that drafting laws and they're on another planet. I mean, they don't take the results of research results to feed in the policy making. That's very rare. It's not systemically done. It's difficult in a way.
Yeah, that's just to come back to what you said, Ilias, that I think, yes, we have to have, let's say, some other dimension represented beyond the pure technical aspect. I've been involved in the KDT cluster, which is a European cluster that funding microelectronic in Europe. And I've been involved in the writing of the SRIA. SRIA is a big document, more than 500 pages, where we define, in fact, what has to be done for the next 10 years in terms of development for the microelectronics. And it's quite interesting that because in this, let's say, group of people who work on that you had people from the industry, from the research centers, from SMEs, but almost nobody from the environmental dimension, nobody from the sociologic dimension. And on my side, because I'm also chairman of a working group that in order with the mission is to try to think about what needs to be done in order to have a greener electronic. And each time I brought in the scope of this agenda some topics really related to environment, for sure I got a lot of resistance from the technologists and from the industry also. That means that for me, I fully agree with what you said, that we need to have the other dimension that which have to be present when we are working in such document that which are defining what needs to be done for the next 10 or 20 years, that it's absolutely mandatory. And even the citizen at the end, I think, because today I would say it's a closed club that with, let's say, the people part of the association, and there is almost nothing coming from outside. So somewhere there is not enough, let's say, new ideas coming in, or new knowledge coming in this type of things. And I fully agree with Ilias that we have to find a way to involve much more people coming from other horizons in this type of discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that now each technology should be developed with having in mind the boundary limits of the planet. But this is quite difficult because we should do that at the worldwide level. So how can we do that? So this is maybe a question for you, Ilias. How can we do a scientific roadmap at the, let's say, the European level, putting into the project that you announced this notion of boundary limits?
Yes, and that's where I come back to Stéphane, that the modeling is not solved. We don't know the impacts. We don't know even where to limit the model of a ICT application or even ICT technology impact, because it's really beyond any technological thinking, and that thinking is missing. So what Patrick demonstrated, I know that SRA, I know the colleagues, they have no clue about what environmental and social dimension of CHIPS Acts means. And when we, and you know, the organizers know because they just will publish paper on this. So no, they know very well what the semiconductor industry impact is in Taiwan. And if we want to transport that to France, let's say, which place will have so much water and so much energy to feed even a production of chips? So all that is kind of secondary, and to model such impact and to come in with the need it serves, I don't think we don't even have architecture how to schedule such meeting to discuss this on some rational basis.
Yeah, that's it. That's the point. So I think that we need to develop a research on that, and to find a way to do a network to exchange data between industry, researcher, and so on.
And there are some basics we can start with. I mean, there are basics of environment, ecological footprint, there are basics of social needs. These basics, even that has not been done. Let's don't talk about very complicated things, but the simple things about like CHIPS Act or AI Act or Digital Services Act, we could have that 3 dimensions, but we're still missing. But I mean, I'm getting in trouble. I have to, as a commission employee, defend what we have put on the table. But I'm internally, what I'm saying here, it's more about, you know, let's put it as an academic. Don't quote me that I have criticized something coming from a commission, but let's make, you know, we need a lot of effort still to get there. And I want academic community, and it's actually the PhD students of today and the researchers of tomorrow that will try to push the boundaries of the normal framework setting, you know, because the comfort zone, like I've seen it in healthcare, is what I understand, what I can measure, where there is a theory behind, where I have equation, I stick to that because it's measurable. I don't like the chaotic world of social world, and I cannot put it in equations. It's not measurable, it's not tangible. And we need to get there. We need to get there. Otherwise, we'll never progress. It will, at the end of the day, it'll be again, whatever can be translated into money. Now, environmental issues can be translated in money. The cost of inaction on environment is much bigger than the money that we can do with factories. You see what I mean? So the degrowth has an economic sense. And until you put it that way, nobody will listen to you. But we need to model it correctly. If I say less production of that means more money and more social needs being met, then people and politicians will worry. If you just say stop the factory X, the salaries of these people, the parliamentarian from that region will kill any idea like that.
Thank you. To stay on the question of the data and the transparency, if you consider that we need data for making models, how do you think a company has to provide the data to the politician, to the citizen, to the academia, in order to do you think that you have to provide data as a raw data or in a summarized data in a more understandable way? And how can we trust your data if there are some
I think I understand the question is for me.
for you.
So that's for a company that providing data to that domain, providing data to this domain is always complex. It's complex for two reasons. That because somewhere you don't want to show that you are not you are less good than your competition, so that you have to provide things that to be honest, and we are honest in ST, no problem with that. Because ST is a company that which have been started to publish an environmental report 25 years ago. The first one we published was 25 years ago, and we were almost the only company doing that. It was the impulsion of our CEO of that time, Pasquale Pistorio, who understood at that time that environment will become a big issue for the technology. Today we report data. We are honest in the data we report. The big question, and it's the same question for all the company in the world, because I look at the report from our competition, from Infineon, Intel, TI, and a lot of companies. Everybody reports numbers which are, I would say, in advantage. Because today there is not a very single and let's say well-defined framework that everybody report the same thing. We all try to report in the different scope, 1, 2, and 3, but in the different scopes that we select more or less the item we decide to report. So this is the first point. So somewhere it's difficult to have the difficulties to understand if the data are relevant, that are they representative, that it's difficult to understand that. The other things that which is difficult to report data, and especially, for instance, for doing life cycle assessment, it's sometimes that you have to disclose some data which are very confidential and which could give some information about your manufacturing process or techniques you are using in your product to your competition. So for sure, in this case, you can understand that the companies are very reluctant to provide this data, so that we have to find a way to try to provide information, because some of our customers are asking for information. But it's not possible that to make completely open all the data that the people would like to see, because some of them are confidential and could give a good insight to our competition about our manufacturing process or the techniques we are using for product. So this means that the data is a real problem. It's a real problem. I'm involved in a working group in France that working on LCE for power electronic for electric vehicle. And when we are discussing with the people from the automotive industry in France, they are asking things that's very difficult for us to provide. And sometimes it's even difficult to provide the data because we don't have them. Today, we are measuring a lot of things, but we are not measuring everything. Things will be improving because regulation is moving, European regulation is moving, worldwide regulation is moving. So this will push the companies that to provide much more information and much more relevant information. But sometimes, even if we want to provide the information, we are not able to do it because we are not measuring everything. So that's this means that for the data, we do, and every company do its best. But it's very difficult to have all the data completely transparent that everybody can use them. This is very, very complex topic.
I would invite people to look at the Data Act. If there's lawyers in the audience, look at the Data Act. I struggled, and I was part of that group. We struggled to make sure that private sector, for environmental and climate reasons, would have to disclose some data, because it's a taboo. Private sector cannot share with government, should not be forced to share with government. So it's, you know, this, what we call emergency situation. So imagine COVID, things like that. And we're trying to open the possibility that for the public health and emergencies of environmental nature, we would need to share data, wherever that comes from, government to government, government to private, private to government. And it's not there. So there's a political kind of hesitancy. And there are possibilities to create data spaces where we can even secure who can see it, but people don't trust systems yet. Yeah?
Thank you, Ilias. Maybe I want to come back on a thematic which was quite at the center of the discussion here at the doctoral school, which is the thematic of degrowth. Ilias, you mentioned also the need to not have the economic needs as the only priority, and to maybe allow to economy to stagnate at some point. Maybe this is also a question for François. So in terms of forcing the industry into inducing the industry into this degrowth, could solutions such as renationalization or relocation of ICT industries would be in solution? Maybe we can then later link it to the CHIP Act. François, I don't know if you want to react on that.
My opinion is that renationalization is not always, I mean, it's not always a problem solver for everything. I mean, if an industry is acting in a certain economic environment where the rules are such as it has absolutely no incentive to degrow, it's not the fact of having national management of it that will push it to degrow and kind of kill itself in an environment where it's grow or die. So it's well, I mean, there are different types of management which we can have for companies. Much more horizontal one and much more democratic ones are, of course, preferable. But it's just, I mean, I don't expect much at the company level unless the entire rule of the game are changed, and that needs to be done from a juridic point of view, at the political level, to create an environment where industries have no incentive to grow and even incentives to degrow and develop in conformity with environmental targets. I don't remember the rest of the question. I'm actually not sure I answered properly the question.
Can I ask a question? What do you mean by degrowth? If I move from a quantity-driven profit business model where I make money by selling more mobile phones or more pesticides, and I go to service model, so I will not sell pesticides. I will, as a buyer, serve the farmers and say, I will be in charge. And if you change that model to service, they will put as little as possible because it becomes cost to them. And they will only do where it's really needed, because service model will degrow the quantities, but will still be growth for them as economic model. So I don't know exactly what you mean by degrowth. No company will kill themselves like that. But what we really need to enable is to go from selling quantities of natural resources to selling services that minimize the use of natural resource and address the needs of the people. And that move, you need data. And that move, I still think that digitalization can play a positive role.
I think François will have probably a...
Possibly, I need more time to make my mind and have a clear speech on it. But yes, well, we can. I mean, data in specific case can help optimize our process and make them more sustainable. Here, in terms of degrowing, the thing that there are some activity which need to degrow, some other activity which will not need to degrow and will need to grow. So it's, I mean, we need to have a more macroeconomic vision and a plan to help industry which need to degrow to slow down their business and find other outputs and other activities, or shift the workers to other type of activities and so on. So we need to have social plans, not in the sense of getting rid of workers, but like we need to really think of where the economy will need skills and labor and resources, and that's where we need to develop a maximum of flexibility in the economy to be able to help people switch from one polluting or from one activity which needs to grow to another activity which needs to grow to meet.
Then I would challenge Stéphane. Stéphane, maybe you have an idea. What is the post-GDP world? I think if we value the capital, value a very little labor cost and social issues, and undervalue completely the natural resource, the earth provisions, how can we put it in a way that we move to another type of measuring our economical progress?
No, but basically you answered the question. But I understood what you said about degrowth, and of course, the switch to services models is clearly a way. But nevertheless, technology allows gains of productivity objectively. That means that putting bad people in the fields in order to grow things, I agree with you, is necessary. But I also think that at the end we will produce less. So we will produce less food. Well, let's say less meat, for instance. We will produce so let's say less meat, less smartphones, less cars. So there are some things that we are going to produce less. That's the sense of the growth for me, opposing to the let's say the ideal of the growth that capitalism sold in the 50s. Well, before, but let's say in the 50s, 60s, which means we will, all of us, have more of what we want tomorrow. We can have more cars, we can eat more meat, we can, etc., etc. So this is this story. I'm not the only one, but many people don't believe in anymore. So that's the sense of the growth. Of course, that's not it does not mean that everyone will be poor, or that everyone will not have to eat, etc., etc. So I think more or less we agree. It's also a question of how to present it. But at one moment, I think we will have to say that no, we cannot eat so much meat. No, we cannot take the plane so much. No, we cannot have so much cars, etc., etc. So it's a kind of it's a kind of degrowing. We can call it another way, but it's a kind of. And perhaps another thing I would like to say about because we use the word of needs since the beginning of this debate, of this conversation, and I will say something perhaps a bit provocative, but needs don't exist. I mean, if you read Epicure, for instance, I'm not sure of the English name, but it was a Greek name, more or less. When he talks about ataraxy, he says, when he tried to define the basic needs of someone, it's very hard to hear. I mean, if you have something to eat, not very much. If you have a little shelter, not to be too cold, well, more or less, your needs. It's okay with your needs. You don't need anything more. And I don't say it's the model we have to go to go to. But what I say is that all we build, all the needs we have beyond just eating and not being too cold, are needs we build. We build ourselves, the society build, the story, the system builds. So of course we have to live with them. We cannot say these needs that do not exist, we do without them, but we can change them. Well, how we could discuss about how it should take time, but well, just to end with, I think that the word need is a problem in itself, because when we speak about needs, we don't have the same needs. We don't have the same needs had our parents, etc., etc., and of course not the same needs that we'll have our children.
Can I give you one example of maybe it's not as fundamental need, but mobility is a need. Mobility, you can say it's of course healthcare and shelter and food, but mobility is a need. Mobility is served by pushing people to buy cars. Okay, so the economic, do we need cars or mobility? So the mobility has been replaced by the advertisement, almost, by brainwash, that mobility for me means that I have to get money to buy car. Imagine degrowth means that we will have this kind of a mobility as a service where 1/10 of the cars can serve the mobility of that population, of the city, of the region. It's doable because you don't need to own the car. You can just call a car. You can plan exactly the trips you want to do. You can have the car within 15 minutes and you save the 15 minutes of looking for parking. So there are models. So that is a kind of nice model that industry is trying to sell, mobility as a service. But we need to go another step, and that's where research is needed. That's why I'm trying to nail it down to the audience. We need a research, because even as a mobility as a service, it's kind of naive use of digital platforms, because you need to have your, you know exactly where the car is, where you are, where you're going. But there is a problem that people would use that instead of public transport. And you cannot beat public transport from ecological point of view. So you need to design such a mobility as a service to complement the public transport. You have to strengthen the public transport. You need to incentivize people that they don't buy car in addition anyway. So they sign up for the service and buy the car. So you make the problem even bigger. And the last thing, and that's where research is needed from social point of view, is that people will abuse it. And that's the rebound effect. So yes, you will create this mobility as a service. And guess what will happen? People will use it to transport objects. I have a party, I'm on another side of the city. I call my friend, put 2 bottles of wine in that electric autonomous car and send it to me. Something that was not possible before. And suddenly all this thinking, theoretical thinking of how much more ecological this mobility as a service is, will become a nightmare because people will send lemon and wine, a box, whatever. So that has to be thought through and forbidden by law from the beginning. So we need to really think about where we're going, what degrowth means, how you serve the need, but you do not do damage as a corollary, as a side effect. And we are not yet there. We are not yet there as a society to even comprehend and start thinking about these futures.
Thank you. Yes, I think we're going to try to keep the answer from François quite quick because we're going to have to kind of conclude. We have to end at 1. So François, maybe a quick reaction.
Thank you. Quickly, just on the need, we have a wrong understanding of need for the beginning, as was just said, but it's, well, okay, many things. First of all, when there is a rebound effect, most of the time is because the fundamental need which is behind is not understood properly. And because we are not talking of a need, but of a satisfier. And there is a strong distinction to make between what is a need and what is a satisfier. And mobility itself is not a need. Mobility is a satisfier for other needs. And the only approach which is anthropologically coherent from all societies that was developed so far is the one that Manfred Max Neef developed on fundamental human needs. He provided a classification of different needs, which are about affection, protection, participation, creativity, idleness, etc., etc. And these are needs that we can find in every society. And everything else, even shelter is it's a satisfier of energy prediction and so on. So we have to step back every time and think, okay, what is a fundamental need which is universal? And how can we meet it? And is this satisfier the best option, or are there other satisfiers? So we really need to have another understanding of need. When we speak of economic need, it's the same. There is nothing like economic need. There is economic incentive, economic desires, maybe. Sometimes we tend to naturalize desire and understand them as need, but they are not needs. So we really need to be super accurate about the use of need, because the devil is in the detail. Thanks.
Thank you, François. I think we're gonna try to make a last round of questions to conclude this panel. So for this last round, I would really like to, so I think we highlighted through this debate that there were sometimes some like communication problems between the different stakeholders or conflicting goals. So I would like each of the speakers to think of concrete steps in order to ease these challenges. And I would like to maybe to start with Leah to come back on something that struck me that Ilias said, is that there is no decision taken by a commission, like a European commissioner, who would be based on something that a researcher published, because the language, like they do not speak the same language. So maybe for Leah, who is a bit at the interface between research and industry, how as researchers could we like try to produce a better comprehensible conclusion for decision makers, and also maybe not fall into the vicious cycle of I write my research because I know that the European grants will grant me fund because of like, for example, quick example, I work in IoT. If I want to get money, I know that I will have to say I will produce IoT that is super energy efficient for fast deployment in agriculture, but that's not necessarily what I find is what we need as a civilization. So maybe on the communication point and on the how do we get out of this cycle of writing to ensure grants? And big question, but
yeah, big question. Maybe the first thing would be to accept not to publish on dedicated journals and to do a work of something like vulgarization for the public and for the European Commission. So maybe to publish on open site in the web. This can be a way. And maybe to do more transdisciplinary research. I mean that we need that people doing societal analysis, people that doing technology, discuss together. You have seen even in this panel debate that sometimes it's difficult to understand each other between François and ourselves and so on. I think that we need to go back also to do a little bit of semantic, I don't know the word in English, what is really behind the word technology and what is really behind the word society. So we need to do a lot of research in this, what the word society means, because when we are doing society, you have people that want to lead the society, to be the chief. And so to be the chief, they need to have power. So they need to have more than the others. So then you will have more object and so on. So that's the beginning of the consumption and the overconsumption, I really think. And so that I engage all the engineers to go in the public debates. I know it's difficult. Etienne Klein said that in a nice way. I need I engage moderate people just like you to engage yourself in moderate debate, even if it's difficult, to explain what technology is. Because when you have a toothache, you go to the dentist, and the dentists use a lot of technology. So we need technology. Which technology we need to define, but we need technology. So vulgarization, transdisciplinary analysis. I think that we should switch the PhD's work. We should ask, even if you are doing a very scientific technology, you should have a chapter on the environmental and societal aspect of your technology. This could be nice.
Okay. Thank you. So maybe for the other, try to be quick and focus on the communication challenge between the different stakeholders in a few words.
No, to end with, I shall do advertisement myself. No, just to say about the future of the young engineers, the young doctors. There are today in our country, but in the world, other economic models of companies, of or other way of working that are emerging. So I don't say that the rest is not worse, but there are some alternatives. So as I said, I'm a member, for instance, of an association which is Framasoft, which is able today to propose a kind of alternative to YouTube. Well, not exactly the same system, but it's built with one developer in France, with a total budget of the association, which is 500 Ks or something like that. But only one developer is today creating a possible alternative to YouTube. So that's very, very, very little energy to make that possible. That means that every one of you has more or less the same power in your hands. Another example is Picassoft is a very small association created in my university, which is, we call this a chaton. It's kind of a kitten. It's kind of, but it doesn't work in English. Kind of a little copy of Framasoft. Today, it is the association is able to run a widely used collaborative software for all the university with only 2, 3, 4 students not paid for, and the total budget of the association is something like 1,000 euros. So it's possible to do such alternative things. That's the first point. There are, of course, other examples.
Stéphane, sorry to interrupt, but we
We have to conclude.
Yes.
No, just to end with in one word, there are other models like French cooperative, so other model of society, of companies and private companies too. And I just last thing about really 1 minute, I promise. No, but in my university, there's a multicultural formation which is called UTech, and engineers which are trained both in science and in human science. And it do works. If you're interested, come and see us and just copy the model in your future universities. And
I think we will be able to talk about this during the lunch break with Stéphane, who is visibly eager to share his initiatives.
Okay. So just a very few words. I think that if I could make a recommendation to you young engineers, I think what's important, we have to change the algorithm that we clearly see all what we discuss. Today, we have the world which is completely driven by the economic. And aside of that, we try to see what could be the impact on the environment. We have to change the thinking that putting the environment in first. We are in an environment. We are in a finite planet. What can our environment support? And in this constraint, what can we do? And I'm pretty sure that we can be very innovative. It's not a limit at innovation. It's opportunity for innovation, but we have to change the algorithm, because if we continue like we do, we have no chance to change the problem. That it's almost impossible. So that's what, if I would recommend something, do not hesitate to reverse the way we think, because it's not the loss of innovation, it's opportunity for innovation.
Maybe Ilias?
I spoke a lot and I second very much what Patrick just said. Don't be limited as students and try to always think of all three dimensions, and that will be a future proof. The future of just making money based on economic niche is over. And if you think long term, there are opportunities. So there is a new way of innovation that don't be limited by the existing, what the innovation funds look for, what the banks look for, or even what you are taught in the school. Go open your eyes.
Thank you. And to end this discussion, François, you can go.
For final word, I would say step back and always try to keep the big picture in mind of what is the purpose of what you're doing. Is it really the final end of what you're doing? Why does it make sense? Are there other alternatives? Are you sure that what you are sure about is really true? Yeah, really open your mind to other way of considering the problem and questioning whether the problem you're trying to address is really the fundamental problem. And also try to involve citizens in all the activity that you develop, whether it's research with participative research, whether it's policy making with some kind of hybrid events and a citizen convention and so on, and try to act for democracy, and the rest will follow.
Okay, thank you, François. I think just to conclude that I'm pretty sure all these young researchers are very eager to imagine new worlds and propose new solutions, but I think this bottom-up approach must be met by people who currently have the responsibilities and the power to meet this bottom-up movement. So I hope this will be the case in the upcoming years. And thank you all five for this very interesting debate. I know that it's not always easy to discuss this issue with stakeholders who have such different day-to-day realities and constraints, but I think the discussion was quite constructive. So thank you to all five, and you can continue discussion with the speakers which will stay at the lunch break. I don't know if there will be some of them, but thank you, and we can give a big round of applause to all of the speakers.
Thanks. Bye.